Why does no one talk about Liyue? Here we are back with this series, this time explaining one by one all the characters from beautiful Liyue, the Nation of Contracts. A quick look at their stories, origins, and the essence of the characters. Show this section lots of love so we can keep it going. And remember, I'm just an apprentice in Tebat. I'm still far from other Hoyoverse scholars when it comes to knowledge, which in a way makes these videos even more special, because for me too, it's a journey where I get to learn how to research all these characters and document this path with you all for posterity. It's a way for me to fall even more in love with this world that amazed me just a year ago. Just like with Mondstadt, let's start with the one who welcomes us by the hand to this mythical land. If there's one thing that defines Liyue, it's its love for traditions. Everything in this nation seems to be carefully guided by ancient contracts, ancestral rituals, and a deep respect for what has been established. Maybe that's why so many souls, unafraid to break the mold, were born in Liyue. Even if it's just in the kitchen. The young chef Xiangling embodies that rebellious spirit, not only by defying the system, being a 4-star and one of the best characters in the game, but also by experimenting with all kinds of dishes and flavors, in contrast to Liyue's strict culinary culture. While the elders frown at her culinary experiments and the chaos she often causes by wielding the pyro element while cooking, the younger generations and travelers arriving at the port are fascinated by her ability to turn seemingly incompatible ingredients into unforgettable experiences. Of course, there are also times when her recipes are questionable, as she's recently taken a liking to dishes so spicy they would make even the people of Natlan cry, but her tireless curiosity and desire to grow are truly admirable. She's the kind of person who refuses to stay stuck in the comfort of the familiar. Always by her side is Guoba, a little creature whom she named after her favorite sweet treat, a traditional Chinese snack. Everyone sees him as just a fun pet who joins her in her culinary mischief. But in reality, this being is actually Marchosius, a powerful deity who lived in Liyue long before Rex Lapis took on the human form we know, and who, in order to save the nation, sacrificed his power, appearance, and intelligence, taking on this form. One day, the young girl Xiangling, while searching for ingredients in the mountains, came across him and offered him food, which led the ancient god to follow her from then on, perhaps moved by the same warmth he himself once embodied. Even in this form, Marchosius still retains some sense of who he was in his past life. So there is a possibility that one day he might regain his power, or going even further, that he could pass it on to his companion. In any case, this bond symbolizes how the past and the present can and should coexist in harmony, enriching tradition instead of breaking it. A revolution that begins in the kitchens or on the stages, where we find another young woman attuned to pyro, whose gaze burns with the fire of irreverence. Xinyan. Her passion is music. And raised among the conventions of Liyue's gentle melodies and ancient harmonies, she bursts in with blaring guitars, powerful vocals, and rhythms strong enough to shake the city's stone pillars. But Xinyan isn't intimidated by the initial rejection her unusual sounds provoke. Because for her, music isn't just a sequence of notes, chords, and harmonies. It's a statement of principles, a projection of her view of the world. While Liyue's society clings to the comfort of the familiar, she firmly believes in the value of personal expression and the need to break free from anything that limits our true nature. Her guitar is a weapon of rebellion, a call to awaken the youth of Liyue and show them that it's okay to be different. That it's okay to make noise, literally and metaphorically, if it's in defense of what's authentic. Like most pyro characters, she received her vision by feeding that inner fire and not letting criticism or suspicious looks extinguish it. But if Xinyan is open rebellion, the other great musician of the nation, Yunjin, represents a quiet revolution. She doesn't aim to break with tradition, but rather to renew it from within, to show the world that classical doesn't mean boring or static. From a young age, Yunjin was immersed in Liyue's traditional opera, a refined and highly ritualized art form. But even though she deeply loves her culture and roots, she always felt that opera could do more than just repeat old stories from the past. She decided to give a voice to the present, incorporating new elements, contemporary narratives, and modern characters that reflect the current reality of Liyue. She would even frequently attend Xinyan's rock concerts, which captivated her, something the nation's elites frowned upon, forcing her to come up with countless excuses. So what makes Yunjin special isn't just her magnificent vocal technique or her natural elegance, but her courage to challenge and question expectations from within the very system itself. Then, when a new opera debuted featuring contemporary heroes and everyday dilemmas, many traditionalists were scandalized, but Yunjin persisted, and little by little, she won over not only a young audience, but also some of the most conservative critics, who eventually surrendered to her talent and accepted that tradition could not remain unchanged if it was to survive. If Xinyan and Xiangling are the blazing fire of a rebellious youth eager to break barriers and evolve, Yunjin was born destined to be the pillar of Liyue's culture. Just as Xinyan does in her concerts, or Xiangling in her culinary experiments, she understood that above all else, art is about telling something sincere. That epiphany made her want to be a bridge between those two worlds, granting her a geo-vision. But there are those who not only fight to keep traditions alive, but also dare to create their own. In another corner of Liyue, among shipments, dances, and smiles, a young man named Gaming is fighting his own artistic battle. Born in a tea harvesting port, his fate seemed set to inherit the family business. But Gaming had a dream. He wanted to dance. More specifically, he wanted to master the art of wushu, the ancient beast dance. His father opposed that childish wish to give everything up, and when Gaming's mother passed away, their relationship deteriorated even further. Until one day, without saying a word, Gaming left, taking with him only a beast head crafted by his mother. Since then, his life has been a mix of hard work, street art, and an optimism that not even the stones of the port have been able to wear down. By day, he escorts caravans and hauls crates as a guard for the Sword and Chess Transport Agency. And at night, he trains, dreams, and dances, hoping that one day the dance of the beasts will be as renowned as Yunjin's opera. At least, with me, he's succeeded. There isn't a character as satisfying to watch move on screen during combat. Even though he distanced himself from his father, luckily, he never completely broke that bond. Every letter he receives from an assistant of the family business carries the unspoken, awkward concern of a father who doesn't know how to ask for forgiveness, and Gaming replies to them without resentment, like someone healing a wound without touching it, just with the warmth of time. Once, during an ambush on one of his escorts, he risked his life to protect the shipments. When it was all over, the only thing missing from the inventory was something no one had ordered, a vision. Gaming looked at it confused. Is this really from me? But I was just doing my job. It wasn't until he saw the engraving on the plaque of gratitude that he understood. The dance of the Suwani doesn't live only on stage, but in every act of courage, every promise kept, every firm step in which we choose to be different. And so, with his vision in hand and the goofy smile of someone who still can't believe he's worthy, Gaming kept on dancing, because there are dreams that can't be bought or inherited. They're earned step by step, with your soul burning in every turn. Closing out this segment, we have Hu Tao, an enigmatic figure who seems like she stepped out of a poem written backwards. Director of the Wang Sheng funeral parlor, an incorrigible prankster, and yet one of the people who best understands the value of life. Hu Tao writes verses on the walls. She slips through the shadows of the harbor and turns rooftops into stages. She publishes poetry collections with absurd names that no one knows where to buy, and yet her book, The Elegant Hilly Churl, is already a classic in Liyue. You might think she's a strange girl with a fondness for coffins and morbid jokes, but that's just scratching the surface. Buried beneath all that, Hu Tao carries something much deeper. At 13, she organized her grandfather's funeral, the man who taught her to live lightly and die with dignity. She bid him farewell, following all the rites with a solemnity no one expected. Then she took a lantern, a handful of supplies, and set off alone into the night toward the invisible border that separates life and death. Her only goal was to see him one last time, and even though she didn't find him, she returned with one certainty. Her grandfather wasn't among the lost spirits, because he had lived without regret. That conviction became her philosophy. Live with heart, follow your path, accept death, and never stop laughing along the way. Since then, Hu Tao has been a figure as puzzling as she is unforgettable. The Hu Tao we see isn't just the director of the funeral parlor, nor just a poet without a publisher. She's a young woman who has embraced death so completely that she's decided to live more intensely than anyone else. Every word she says might sound like a joke, but deep down it hides a complex and powerful philosophy. Yunjin or Gaming elevate life through the stage. Hu Tao honors it, even at its end. But on that border between life and death, Chongyun is a young exorcist, born into a family with a long and respected tradition in the craft. As if he embodied all the talent of his lineage, this young man is pure Yang energy. In Taoism, Yang is the creation energy, the energy of the sun, action, warmth, expansion, a vibrant and dominant source that this young man radiates with such intensity that he doesn't even need ritual tools like other exorcists. He himself is a walking talisman. His mere presence drives away evil spirits, but that talent is also his burden. What the world sees as a wonderful gift means a constant struggle against himself for Chongyun. His overflowing energy forces him to avoid anything that might overstimulate him. Exposure to sunlight, eating spicy food, even getting excited about a story. He lives in a state of perpetual glacial restraint, forced to exist in cold apathy. That's why he's known as the frozen flame. But Yang cannot exist without Yin. Calmness, receptiveness, intimacy. Yin is not the enemy of Yang, but its counterpart. A shadow cannot exist without a light to cast it, just as light cannot be perceived without a shadow to give it shape. Chongyun spent a long time living a repressed existence just to have a stable life and not cause too much trouble, when maybe what he really needed was balance. Water that wouldn't extinguish his fire but would give it meaning. And everything changed when he met Xingqiu, the second son of a prestigious trading guild in Liyue, who, at first glance, embodies the image of the ideal young heir, well-educated, polite, and deeply immersed in his studies. But behind that facade of formality and discipline beats the heart of a dreamer, passionate about tales of knights and righteous heroes who star in the martial arts novels he devours eagerly. While his older brother immersed himself in the complexities of the family business, he was absorbed in stories of bravery and honor, dreaming of emulating the protagonists of his readings. This duality led him to discover the nearly extinct martial arts of the Wuhua clan, a perfect meeting point between both worlds. With his dedication and innate talent, Xingqiu not only revitalized the Wuhua clan's arts, but also became a passionate defender of justice, stepping in whenever he perceives injustice and selflessly offering his help to those in need. But that sense of justice is balanced by his carefree, almost mischievous personality. He is constantly joking around, sometimes testing the patience of those close to him. The relationship between Xingqiu and Chongyun symbolizes that dynamic between complementary opposites, which we've seen as a recurring theme in Liyue. While Chongyun approaches life with stoic seriousness, Xingqiu brings lightness and spontaneity, constantly challenging his friend to see the world from different perspectives. But if the nation of contracts can move forward, it's not just because of the passion of youth, but also because there are those who, even from a high position, take the time to listen, observe, and act accordingly. Figures who were not born gods, but learned to move like one. Because for a city to flourish, someone has to hold up the sky. In a city ruled by contracts, laws, and gold, there is no figure more imposing than Ningguang. Pronouncing the Chinese names from this nation is quite something. Forgive me for that. But in Liyue, her name is spoken with both admiration and solemnity, as if every syllable that leaves her lips carries the echo of an irrevocable decision. Few people can look down on an entire city from above. But Ningguang doesn't just watch it, she rules over it like her own game board. From the Jade Chamber, a floating palace she built herself with her own fortune, so high that it casts its shadow over all of Liyue. But years ago, that same woman walked barefoot along the seashore, selling whatever she could just to survive. No one helped her, no one gave her a push. Everything she has, she built on her own. In a region like Liyue, full of supernatural beings bordering on the divine, it's striking that someone like Ningguang, an ordinary human, has risen to the very top. But this is the nation of contracts, and as such, Ningguang possesses something even more powerful. A mind capable of turning every conversation into information, every secret into an advantage. And her spies aren't soldiers or mercenaries. They're all the people of the nation, the children playing in the streets. She listens to them with a smile and then builds Liyue's future with what they tell her. Information far more valuable than any secret report. Whenever a threat arises, whenever a law needs to change, she goes up to her chamber with her assistants, receives all the reports, and then stays alone. She decides everything in silence, and when she's finished, she tears up every document, every plan, every formula, and throws the pieces out the window. The fragments of paper fall over the city like snow. The merchants see them falling and shudder. They know that Ningguang has made a decision and that the business world is about to change. Many call her cold, saying she only cares about money and sees life as a chessboard where she always plays to win. And that's true. Ningguang enjoys every victory in the market as if it were a battle. But that doesn't mean she lacks principles or doesn't know what's truly important. During the Osio crisis, she didn't hesitate to sacrifice her greatest treasure, her Jade Chamber. It was her greatest loss and her greatest victory, because she realized that nothing she had built was worth more than the people looking up at her from below. The story of how she got her vision is almost like a joke of fate. She found an unclaimed one and didn't hesitate to put it up for sale. As she was writing out her plans to sell it, smiling and imagining all the money she could make from it, that excitement activated the vision, making her its owner. All her assistants were happy for her, but Ningguang herself couldn't help feeling disappointed at losing that potential sale. This is often misunderstood as an extreme act of greed, but to me, it's proof that she has a clear understanding of the values that got her to where she is. Ningguang managed to build everything around her without the need for divine gifts. So a vision, which is usually seen as a blessing, is actually pretty insignificant in her understanding of power. And she's not wrong. Because in a world where gods withdraw and beings of unimaginable strength fall, she, true to her ideals, remains there, building empires with information, strategy, and paper fluttering like snowflakes over the harbor. But the political structure of Liyue is complex, featuring all kinds of unique figures, like Keqing. In a world of gods, Keqing chose not to believe. While others prayed to Rex Lapis, the god who had protected Liyue for centuries, she was the only one asking the uncomfortable questions. What will we do when he is no longer here? Do we really have to let others decide our fate? That's why many saw her as arrogant and disrespectful. But what seemed like blasphemy ended up becoming a prophecy. Shortly after, Rex Lapis disappeared and Keqing didn't hesitate. On the contrary, she stepped forward, taking on all the responsibilities of the city's construction and daily stability on her shoulders. She is efficient, perfectionist, and tireless. If a task takes 2 weeks, she finishes it in 2 days. Not just quickly, but perfectly. That's why, when she was ironically granted an electrovision, Keqing didn't see it as a gift, but as a handout. A bribe to make her abandon her ideals. A leash to silence her rebellion. She tried to destroy it, throwing it into the fire, smashing it against rocks, tossing it from the jade chamber, but it remained intact. In the end, seeing with her own eyes how gods and humans aren't so different, she decided to keep it. She understood that the gods respect people who are critical. Those who, no matter what their opinions are, stay true to their beliefs and back them up with actions and hard work. They weren't mocking her. They were acknowledging her. Another prominent figure within Liyue's complex bureaucracy, though this time with one foot in the mortal world and the other in the divine, is Yanfei, the most important legal expert in the nation of contracts. Half human, half adeptus, and 100% capable of making you pay for not reading the fine print. At first glance, Yanfei seems like an ordinary person. Young, enthusiastic, a bit scatterbrained, but beneath that laid-back image lies a brilliant mind. If there's a business dispute, a legal loophole, or a confusing clause, merchants don't hesitate to turn to her. She's not someone who just memorizes laws. She understands their deeper essence, interprets them, questions them. Yanfei believes in justice. That's why her greatest treasure isn't a weapon, it's a bronze scale her father gave her. It's said that this scale can weigh the value of anything. One day, she tried to weigh her pyrovision on her magical scale. On the other side, she piled up coins, even precious stones, but nothing balanced its weight. Until she placed on it a box full of something that truly resonated with her, legal documents and notes, and it weighed more. That's when she realized that true power doesn't come from the gods, but from one's own inner fire. While some build laws and others debate Liyue's fate in brightly lit offices, there are also those who work quietly, in corners where the light doesn't reach. And if there's one person who embodies that invisible part of the city, it's Yelan. They say she works at the Ministry of Civil Affairs, but no one has ever seen her name in the records. Some believe she's a myth. Others think she's a ghost. The truth is that Yelan exists, and she only appears when the city needs her most. Her work isn't meant to be admired, or even understood, but without it, Liyue would be left in the dark. She writes lists, official lists of people who could disturb the peace, and others, much more secret, with the real threats. Fatui, gods. No one knows what names are on those lists, except for Yelan. When the sun slowly sinks over the Sea of Liyue, some look to the west and see only a ship disappearing among the waves. But others know that a legend is aboard that vessel. Beidou, captain of the Crux fleet, wasn't born into contracts, nor was she blessed by any god. She was born poor, starving, stealing fruit just to survive. But she was also born with something stronger than any decree or family name, the determination to never give up. And it wasn't a god who gave her that strength, it was the sea. That's where she built her reputation, first as a captain, then as a symbol. To some, she's the woman who beheaded Hai Shang, the sea monster that haunted the stories of their childhood. To others, she's the one who shared her meager food with a drifting boat without asking for anything in return. To her sailors, she's all of that and much more. Beidou doesn't lead with tyranny, but by example. Their loyalty is a choice, not an obligation. And so, Beidou rolls the dice with the salty breeze on her face, trusting her instincts more than calculations. In her own way, she also protects the city, but she does it from the edge of the map, with a sword on her shoulder and a sailor's song on her lips. But not all of Liyue is built on laws, contracts, and warships, because if you listen closely, among the mountains and golden rooftops, you can still hear names that are even older. Names that are barely whispered, as if saying them out loud would summon something too ancient, too painful. Xiao is neither a god nor a mortal. He is a weapon sharpened over centuries, used by Liyue and forgotten by almost everyone. He was one of Morax's 5 great enforcers, summoned to purge the aftermath of the chaos left by the Archon War. When the ancient gods fell, their hatred did not disappear. It lingered in the air, poisoning the land and unleashing demons, specters, monsters, and nightmares. And there he was, facing them all, alone. Always alone. But Xiao wasn't born that way. Before becoming the conqueror of demons, he was enslaved by a cruel deity, forced to kill, even to devour the dreams of his victims. His soul was corroded and his will broken. It was Rex Lapis who, after defeating his captor, gave him not only freedom, but also his new name, Xiao. A second chance, but also an eternal contract. Since then, he has carried a debt so great that even his body, his soul, and his mind have started to fall apart under its weight. That's why he avoids contact with humans. His kindness is deeply buried beneath millennia of pain, but it's still there, in the way he remembers the names of his fallen comrades, in how, sometimes, he accepts a small portion of almond tofu, not for the taste, but for the texture that forces him to remember the dreams he once devoured. There are moments, brief instants, when the weight of the past seems to lighten, when he hears a flute in the middle of the night and, for a moment, his burden feels less heavy, when he sets aside the tofu and asks for grilled fish as a silent tribute to Pervases, his fallen warrior brother, when he keeps his promise to appear if someone says his name, or when he simply stops, observes, and for a second allows himself to feel. Xiao doesn't know if he'll ever be free, but even if he doesn't say it, his heart still holds on to hope. Amid the golden skies and the solitary footprint Shenhe leaves in the snow, the figure of another Adeptus rises, one who, for centuries, danced among the clouds, though almost no one in Liyue remembers her name, but those who do remember her call her Xiangyun, the Cloud Retainer. She was there before anyone else, when the elements were wild and the sky was still shattered after the fall of the celestial thrones. Amid that chaos, beings like her emerged, guides and sometimes merely witnesses to the end. Xianyun was one of the forces that rose up against the demons in a time when hunger, plague, and despair ravaged the living. With her power, she made the wind gather the clouds, and with them, the rain washed the poison from the land. From then on, she was seen as a savior, a guardian of skies and mountains, a mother to her own. During the Golden Age, she lived among melodies and learning. She witnessed how the harmony between Adeptus and humans seemed eternal, but it wasn't. The war took everything away. The city fell, and the survivors walked south with Rex Lapis to found what we now know. Since then, she took refuge in her disciples, whom she treated with a mix of strictness and tenderness, as if she carried within her the last hope of a bygone era. She protected her even from the shadows, disguising herself to heal her without her knowing. She followed them like a mother who doesn't want to say goodbye, but they grew up, left the city, and she stayed on the mountain, surrounded surrounded by memories that no one else shared. Years later, she realized that if she wanted to reunite with her children, she couldn't keep waiting from up high. And so, the preserver of clouds descended into the human world, not as a goddess, but as a mother searching for her children.
Ganyu is not like the others, neither like the Adeptus nor like humans.
She was born more than 3,000 years ago, the daughter of a human and a kind, supernatural being. But what makes her lineage exceptional, she experiences as a fracture. When she was a child, she believed she was just another Adeptus, but the day she saw a human, she hid for 2 days, terrified, thinking it was a monster. And when she realized that the real monster was her, something inside her broke. Since then, she has never stopped feeling out of place. Too human for the mountains, too divine for the city. Sometimes she can be seen in restaurants, sitting alone in a corner, eating in silence. Because as long as she is useful, as long as people value her for what she does and not for what she is, then she can feel like she belongs to something. Her contract with Rex Lapis was just that, an opportunity to guide humanity.
But even her devotion to Zhongli has not been able to resolve the dilemma that haunts her.
Can a creature that is neither fully human nor fully divine truly have a place of her own in the world? During the years of war, she fought. During times of peace, she worked. And when Zhongli decided to step down as Archon, Ganyu thought that she too should leave. If humans no longer needed gods, did they need someone like her? She returned to the mountains, to the cold, to the rituals. She tried to forget the tastes of the world and sleep on the grass like she did when she was a child. But neither the Adepti nor the humans made her feel at home, because the home she seeks may have never existed.
Ganyu is as gentle as a cloud, but also as steadfast as the contract she signed centuries ago.
And even though she constantly wonders if she truly belongs in this world, she has decided to keep trying, because kindness can also be an act of courage.
Shenhe was not born to be an Adeptus. She was a human child, the daughter of a broken family. Her mother had died, and her father, consumed by grief, made an unthinkable decision to offer his own daughter as a sacrifice to an evil god, hoping that would bring his wife back to life. She was only 6 years old when she was locked in a cave, alone with the rotting remains of that creature, and she survived. Not by luck or by miracle. She survived by fighting. It was then that the Cloud Retainer found her, and at that very moment, Shenhe received her cryo-vision, one of the earliest ever recorded, not as a reward, but as a reflection of a fractured soul who froze her emotions so she wouldn't completely break. Since then, she was raised among the Adepti, trained in their art. Her power grew to the point where she had to seal herself with red ropes to keep from losing control of her spiritual energy. She has lived isolated from the world, marked by violence, feared even by her own power. And yet, when duty calls, she descends from the mountains. And every time she does, it seems she wonders if there is still something within her worth saving. But not all the disciples of the Adepti were born amid tragedy or broken promises.
Take YaoYao, for example, the child protected by the gods and by every creature of the forest. While Shenhe was drawn into the mountains out of desperate need, YaoYao came to them in perfect harmony. Ever since she was very young, the animals of the forest would approach her, as if they were lifelong friends. One day, that invisible bond with nature was noticed by a mysterious old woman who turned out to be none other than Madame Ping, and so began her journey as a disciple of the Adepti. But YaoYao was not isolated from the human world. On the contrary, Madame Ping encouraged her to explore the city, to play, to discover. She taught her that growing up isn't just about training, but also about watching the ships in the harbor, running across rooftops, asking silly questions, and crying in front of a map when you realize how big the world is. In an environment that could have turned her into a weapon, YaoYao was raised to be a heart. She trains every day, of course, but she also hugs her stuffed rabbit, named Yue, a special gift from the Cloud Retainer that can protect her and secretly keep track of her. Because even though the mountains are silent and her footsteps are light, there are many eyes watching over her. Someday, she will find her place. And while that day comes, she keeps training with a spear that's still a little too big for her, hugging Yue during every nap and running back home when night falls. In a city as deeply rooted in tradition as Liyue, where even the rules of life and death are more rigid, it's no surprise that debates arise about the value of life and what lies beyond. That's where the most enigmatic doctor in Teyvat appears, Baizhu, owner of the Boo Boo Pharmacy. At first glance, Baizhu seems like a kind and well-mannered doctor, willing to heal anyone who walks through his door. But behind that friendly facade lies a story marked by loss, sacrifice, and a question that haunts him. Is it possible to cure death? A fate shaped by the pain of having watched his home and his parents disappear because of a plague. Since then, he has dedicated his life to easing the suffering of others, and his obsession with finding immortality is nothing more than the ultimate expression of that calling. For him, defeating death would be the greatest medical achievement, the ultimate panacea. But it's not just that. Baizhu has made a pact with Zhangsheng, an ancient creature who grants him hidden knowledge and extraordinary medical abilities in exchange for his own health. The toxins and diseases he extracts from his patients end up in his own body. Day after day, his life deteriorates from within. So immortality isn't just a medical dream, it's his last hope for himself. And even so, he knows this pact was inherited, that others will have to bear this curse if he ever disappears. But if he could live forever, maybe he could carry that burden for all eternity. But is it fair? Is it right to disrupt the natural balance just to save a few lives? Hu Tao is firmly opposed. She believes that tampering with the cycle of life and death will bring unimaginable consequences, that forcing permanence even for a good cause could break the invisible threads that hold the world's order together. And Baizhu might feel the same way. He knows that if he ever manages to defeat death, he won't do it as a god, but as a vessel for eternal illnesses. But even so, he keeps going, because as long as his heart keeps beating, even just a little, someone will live one more day thanks to him. And among all those patients, there is one who stands out. A little girl trapped between life and death, who without knowing it has inherited Liyue's oldest conflict. Someone who has also been denied the right to rest. And her name is Qiqi, the pharmacy's apprentice herbalist, and also someone who is living while dead. Qiqi died many years ago during an expedition to the mountains, caught in a conflict between the Adepti and the demons. Morax, taking pity on her, gave her a second chance through a forbidden technique, showing that even the gods in this world can make mistakes. Since then, Qiqi has lived as a zombie. Her memories are constantly fading to the point where she has to write down in a notebook what she feels, what she thinks, what she loves. She doesn't remember her family, her death, or her rebirth. She only knows that she is alive and that she shouldn't be. She works under the care of Beidou, who keeps her as an assistant and sometimes as an experiment. Qiqi represents the most tragic of miracles. She is the living, or not so living, reflection that sometimes what is broken shouldn't be fixed, not even at the whim of a god. And so, with everything we've seen, one might think we've already said everything there is to say about Liyue. But fate had it that we recently met another character, Lan Yan. The most recent addition to this nation's cast of characters is neither a heroine of epic tales nor a central figure in the world's conflicts, and yet her story reminds us why Liyue has survived for so long, not just because of its gods or contracts, but thanks to the quiet care of ordinary people.
Lan Yan grew up among misty valleys in a community of artisans who still live in tune with the rhythm of the seasons. There, among rivers and hills, she perfected her craft as a weaver. But for her, it's not just a skill. Every basket she weaves is a piece of memory of her soul. She can tell the difference between two seemingly identical baskets by the mood she was in when she made them. And if you look closely, maybe you can feel it too. Through the most humble art, weaving, Lan Yan embodies a different kind of immortality. The kind that leaves a mark without making a sound. It's poetic that a weaver is the one to close the intricate web of Liyue. We have walked through the halls of political power, the networks of commerce, the libraries of knowledge, the battlefields, and the depths of the soul. We have seen mortals build empires, demigods torn between worlds, and the watchers of the abyss burdened with invisible wars. But all that tapestry of lives, struggles, and contracts is woven around a single figure who came before them all, who witnessed the birth of the city and also chose to step back. What happens when even the strongest pillar decides to fall? In Liyue, those who possess great judgment and attention to detail are called particulars. But Zhongli isn't particular in just one way. He excels at absolutely everything, whether it's history, commerce, architecture, war, or gastronomy. Zhongli presents himself as a simple consultant at the city's funeral parlor, but behind his calm voice lies one of the oldest secrets in Teyvat. He is Morax, the Geo-Archon, the founder of Liyue, a god who walked this world before human memory could even name him more than 6,000 years ago. When the land was still wild and gods fought for control, Morax descended from the heavens and raised the mountains of Liyue with his own strength. After the pain and horror, Morax did not cry. Instead, he made a vow. He would protect his people through the one thing that should never be broken: contracts. For millennia, he guided his people, founded the city, minted its currency, established the Geo army, taught the art of commerce, and defeated beasts that today are nothing but legends. Every decision, every law, every stone carved in Liyue bore his signature. But even the most sacred rock erodes over time. Morax began to see how humanity was progressing and no longer needed his guidance. But instead of feeling bad, he felt proud. He understood that this was the greatest success of his legacy. That's why he organized his grand final ceremony. He faked his own death. Today, Zhongli is just another person, strolling through markets and docks, listening to concerts in the rain, and giving advice to anyone who asks, as long as they don't ask him to pay the bill. He was the rock that held up the world, and when he saw he was no longer needed, he became dust. Dust that faded away in the wind, as if it never existed.